You know, just once I would love to come to a race and everything go to plan, but I think that's a testament to triathlon that very rarely, if ever, does everything go to plan. There's so many moving parts. And speaking of moving parts, my bike has a lot of them, and one of them decided to not be up to par on race week.
Race week leading up to Worlds was unlike any race week I would think that we've ever had before. We had major hiccups with the bike. Turns out that our bikes weren't shifting properly.
I was having some issues with my big chain ring. So going from the big chain ring up front to the small chain ring up front, the shifting just wasn't working. It was lagging, it was getting stuck, it was hanging, dropped the chain, and this is just in a flat training ride. So obviously something was wrong.
We brought the bike into my ride with only a few hours left before bike check-in closed for the women's that day. We left it there at the shop with DJ and Elise. DJ and Elise were a big part of getting Tiffany to that start line. They were adamant that we just have to exhaust all options to get Tiffany's bike ready.
So DJ and Elise just took charge. They actually worked with Brendan at the bike shop. I don't know how, I don't know what all went on behind the scenes. I just know that they got a new chain ring and they came walking up to bike check-in with my bike, and it was working. I rode it around, transition a little bit. It was good enough for me to feel comfortable to at least start the bike and see where I would get on race day. But yeah, it was a lot of drama, a lot of stress.
I hopped on the bike, went through the gears. It was all shifting as it should, and we felt great. I felt great. It was a huge relief because it was quite the roller coaster of emotions that day. This race has been in the making for years.
It might be easy to say that we did a 3-month training block into the Ironman 70.3 World Championship here in New Zealand. However, I look at it as a lot more than that. When we qualified for our first World Championship in 2018, I think that's when things actually started. I think that was the foundation of everything that we've built upon, everything that's allowed us to grow and challenge ourselves.
We planned to get down to race start about 6:45-ish or so, because that would give me time to get into my wetsuit and, you know, just kind of get comfortable, do a little mobility down at swim start. Did that, went on, found my age group slot, had a few good words with Tiffany and told her that, you know what, she's gonna go out and crush it. We both said, you know, we've put in the work for this, and now it's our time to go out and show the world what we can do. Got into the water and it felt amazing. It really did. The water temperature, I think, was mid-60s or so. It felt lovely in the full sleeve wetsuit. The swim was pretty uneventful. It was very beautiful. The water was very clear and you could see the bottom of the lake the entire swim. So that was really cool. And also, because it was so clear, you could see the anchor of the buoys. Once I was nearing a buoy, I just kind of kept my head down in the water as long as I could, because I could sight off the anchor from the buoy, which you don't normally get the chance to do that. I was glad I could do that, because at the time that my wave went off, I was swimming directly into sunlight, and that made it extremely hard to see the buoys. Swim out, the wetsuit strippers were actually quite close to the swim out, and so I wasn't quite ready to have my wetsuit stripped. Typically, I always have my zip down in the back and pulled down off of my arms. I was already at the wetsuit strippers and I hadn't done any of this yet. So that was a little bit frantic, because I wasn't used to having to do all of that while waiting to be stripped, but it went quick. They actually helped get my sleeves off of my wrist, which that was helpful. Got down on the ground and they, 1, 2, 3, they ripped that thing off. From there, it was an uphill transition run. Kind of ran up one ramp, zigzagged the other way, and went up a man-built ramp to get us up and over a road that led us into transition. We have our bags hung up on racks, and so I grabbed my bag, took a seat, I put my helmet on, grabbed my shoes, grabbed my cleats, and I shoved my wetsuit back into my bag, tied it up, and as I was running off, I handed my bag off to a volunteer, and I ran with my cleats to my bike. Once I got to my bike, that is when I put my bike shoes on, just because it's easier for me to run just barefoot through. Got my bike shoes on, unracked my bike, continued to run it to bike out, which it felt like it was a long transition, but I was already winded by the time I got to the mountain line. I was like, oh my gosh, my heart's just racing. Now I gotta go bike 56 miles up through these hills, but I got going. Again, I had another relapse of Indian Wells, I think. I was not in the correct gear because the mountain line kind of is at a bit of an incline, but nothing too steep or anything. So I fiddled a little bit, but it was okay. I actually think it was more difficult on full gas than it actually was in real life. The first 20K came, and yes, there were some climbing, but I felt like I got up it really well. And there was actually one really fast descent during that first 20K where I was flying down. I think I hit a top speed of 44 miles per hour. That was fun because that was actually kind of just a straight shot. I can't really complain too much about the road. Other than, turns out that there's no flat road in New Zealand. There were a couple long, slow grinders that just kind of seemed to go on forever, but made it through. But I do want to mention it was about mile 40, 44, and all of a sudden, just this train of 15 ladies just comes by me one after another. It's just so blatantly obvious, and they get ahead of me, and I can totally feel that when you get passed by a train, it really does pull you along, and they're just cheaters is what they are. I'm gonna just say it, they're cheaters. So I sat up because I didn't want no part in that. But fortunately, a couple miles after that, a marshal came up, and I was kind of pointing at her. I was like, go get him, because at that point they were maybe not even a half mile up, and you could see that they were still like 6 abreast. And then maybe a mile after that, 2 or 3 more marshals came up, so she must have called in some reinforcements. So I hope karma got you, whoever you are out there, because that's not how you play this game. So the rest of the bike was a little bit of a slow, steady climb, but we made it up, got to the finish line, got to the dismount line, got off the bike, and it's always such a relief to finally get off the bike. It is my favorite discipline, but still always such a relief to get off. I handed my bike off to a volunteer at this race. It was a clean transition, so you don't rack your bike, and the volunteers just kind of take over from there. Wonderful. I pointed to the volunteer, I said, hey, I'm coming for you, and I handed off my bike, and he took it, did whatever with it. I didn't care at that point. I went to where our run bags were hanging. I grabbed my run bag. I took a seat, I dumped out the bag, I put my helmet and my cleats into the bag, put my sock shoes on, hat, and I grabbed my bib and sunglasses, and I started making my way out of transition. Started the run, was feeling really good. I was moving along probably about 8.5 minute pace, which was a really good pace for me at that point. First 4 miles went pretty quick. I held that pace for a good while. But after that, the rolling hills of the run and the heat started to set in, and my pace slowly dropped a little bit. The first few miles went really well. Also, one of the best parts of the first part of the run was I did see Elise out there, and I said, hey Elise, where's Tiffany? And she said that, Tiffany was still moving. I was like, oh, that's such a great relief. But then I'm like playing mind games with myself. I'm like, are they all in cahoots together?
Go. Halfway there. Tiff's just cracked 60K.
But then I came across our friend Jess out on the course, and I asked her, I said, hey, is Tiffany moving? And Jess told me that, yeah, she's moving. She's at whatever mile she was on the bike. But I was like, all right, now I'm relieved. I know that Tiffany is moving on the bike. Her bike is doing good. And it's just time for me to keep putting in the work, because I know that just knowing that Tiffany was safe and moving just took so much off of my shoulders. The rest of the run, it got hot, it did. So I took ice at every single aid station. I put it in my hat, back of my kit, front of my kit. Last mile, I knew I had to really keep pushing because I did want that sub 2 hour mark. I honestly didn't know what my total time was. I kind of self-goal is to kind of always come in with a sub 2 hour run, and I knew that I had to keep pushing. I couldn't walk any of the hills. I knew that I had to pick up the pace if I wanted to come in at that sub 2 hour mark. I hit the finish line, red carpet, and I typically put my hands up trying to get the crowds into it, and I did a little bit, but I was spent. I was spent. By the time I got to the actual finish line, I was just so grateful to be there, and I wasn't even thinking, and I had a facepalm moment, and I did what you shouldn't do when you hit the finish line. I went to stop my watch, and so there went the fabulous finish line pictures, but you know what, that's okay. So I finished my race and I saw DJ, and the first thing I wanted to know was, where's Tiffany?
I'm in the lucky 45 to 49 age group. That means if you're a female racing the World Championship, you start dead last. And that means I started more than an hour after Caitlin. Somebody's got to go last, but at the same time, it made for some lonely moments on race day. It wasn't truly a World Championship experience in some ways. The swim start got into the corral. I was so ready to just get going because I had been waiting, and I just wanted to get started with the day to see how it would transpire. I really didn't know, again, even when I started, if I was going to finish. I didn't know if the bike was going to be up to par for the entire 56 miles. Got into the corral, got into the chute, and there was one lane where women just weren't going. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna take that lane, go ahead and get started, rip the Band-Aid, and get on my way. Got in the water, and it's just spectacular. I knew the swim was probably gonna be the most enjoyable part of the day because it's so clear, so crisp. The water temperature was just about perfect. Could see the bottom clearly the entire way. Yeah, there was some traffic. I had to swim around quite a few other swimmers. I caught up to one or two age groups, some athletes from the age groups that started ahead of me, so that's always a good feeling. And I felt like I was in a good rhythm. I didn't really know what my time or pace was, but by the time I got out of the swim, I saw 35 minutes, which, hey, I was really happy with because there's some currents, there was some chop on the water, and I did get a little bit warm in a couple spots wearing the full sleeve sailfish wetsuit, but other than that, yeah, the swim was pretty awesome, really spectacular, and worth the price of admission. Coming out of the swim, it's quite a jaunt to transition, plus you have some uphill, plus you have to go over a ramp. I decided that, you know, I didn't know what was gonna come on the bike, but I decided to give myself some time to get from the swim finish to transition, to kind of compose myself, kind of get my thoughts together and think how I wanted to attack the bike. Now, because I hadn't really ridden on my bike and I knew I had some new mechanical equipment on my bike, it takes a little bit for me to trust, especially since I had a DNF in St. George because of a bike mechanical. So yeah, that really weighs on you, and that's kind of been a curse for me for the last few years. It's always in the back of my mind, like what can go wrong, what will go wrong. And so I was thinking that I have this new piece on my bike. The first 20K of the bike are gonna be really challenging. Took my time in transition, made sure that I had all my thoughts organized, made sure I had all my gear organized, and then I made my way to the bike. I was in the correct gear getting out of transition, so I felt good on that. I knew that there was gonna be a lot of work ahead in the first 20K. We've done the ride on full gas a couple times, and it was intense. So I was anticipating that. So it was quite a bit of a relief that the first 20K really wasn't terrible. However, something that I had to do for myself was to get to know my bike in that first 20K. I didn't want to make any extreme gear changes. I wanted to go through the gears, make sure everything worked. So that slowed me down, and I'm not happy or pleased with how I did the first 20K. But bottom line, I'm happy that I got through the first 20K, that the bike was responding almost flawlessly. So that gave me the confidence for the rest of the bike ride to get to the bike finish. Once I got through that first 20K, I felt pretty good, and I told myself, yeah, I'm gonna finish this bike. The rest of the bike course is really rolling with not much downhill. So much so that I was actually begging for some downhill in the last 10 miles, just something to stop pedaling for a little bit, something to get some momentum to carry me down, but there wasn't any of that, and there was a long, slow, grinding climb toward the end. Not steep, but just, it wore on you. I think they call it Heartbreak Hill around here. It's like 10K of just constant, just up enough that you can't get any kind of reprieve. And I just wanted to be done with the bike. It was starting to get hot. I sometimes felt like I was the only person on the bike course. Many times felt like I was the only person on the bike course because I started in that last wave. There just weren't a lot of other cyclists around me. There are some lonely moments. There are some just on the cusp of dark moments, but I made it through. And again, I knew if I could get off that bike, there wasn't gonna be anything that would stop me from finding the ultimate finish line.
And she was off the bike and onto the run, and I just knew that once she got to the run, she was gonna bring it. And she did. I wanted to get back out there on the course, find her and cheer her on the best I could.
Made my way out onto the run, and I knew there were gonna be a few things that I would have to contend with, that it was a rolling, slightly hilly course, and it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon already, and the New Zealand sun is intense. It was getting warm. I think it was close to 80 degrees, which for me, and being from Texas and training in the heat, normally not a big deal. I'm accustomed to the heat, but something about the intensity of the sun and the lack of the ozone layer here in New Zealand, you feel it much more. I came out of transition and started my first few strides, and I felt pretty good. So I have a confidence, something I guess that I've learned and grown with this season, is that I run pretty well off of a challenging bike. I run pretty well off the bike. So I let myself have that confidence knowing that I've done this before and I'm not too concerned. Like, I feel like I can go out and knock out a good run. And that's what I wanted to do coming off the bike, leave that behind me. It wasn't what I wanted. The day's not gonna be what I want as far as time is concerned, but the finish line, because it's never guaranteed, that's what I was going after. So I kind of had to resort to, I guess, plan B and just finish the race. I felt good on the run, and some friends and fans and our support crew that was out on the run course even told me I looked good. And when I heard that from DJ, when I heard that from Elise, that just lifted me up. And I'm like, all right, if they say I'm looking good, then yeah, I'm gonna run with that confidence. And I felt like I did. So I ran strong. My splits were pretty solid. I was running some good mile splits right around 9:40. So in those conditions, I was really happy with. A couple parts of the course have a little bit of steep uphill, and my second lap through the steep uphill kind of got me. I started to really feel the heat, and I struggled the last couple of miles to just kind of hold it together, so I kind of lost the pacing there. I don't think it was a fitness issue. I think it was a conditions of the day issue. But I still looked at my watch and I knew that I was having a good run time. It wasn't gonna be what I did in Chattanooga or Ohio, but those courses are vastly different than what we were running on in Taupō. I knew that I was gonna be in the ballpark of having a run to be proud of. And the spectators, even though I was one of the last to finish because I was one of the last to start, spectators were still out there going strong. Volunteers were still out there going strong. Jess, who I met last year at the World Championship in Finland, she was on the run course, and every time I ran by one of these pubs along the run course, I think she had the whole cafe cheering for me. Like, I heard, "Go Team Saunders, go Tiffany," and it just sounded like there was just so much energy resonating from that. And then my last time through, Jess came out on the run course and was just cheering me, and you know, it can't help but make you smile. There's so much positivity in the sport, and I know very few people knew what I went through on race week, much less this year alone, just to get to the start line. So to get to the finish line, It was a weight off my shoulders. The time wasn't necessarily what I wanted. It definitely wasn't what I wanted. It's not what I trained for. It's not what I was capable of, but it was the finish line. And hours before, 24 hours before, again, I was kind of thinking, I'm just gonna have to suck it up. I'm not gonna get that finisher medal. I'm not gonna get that finisher shirt. I'm not gonna get that finisher towel. And it's gonna be really hard. But because of everyone around us that cares, supports us, supports me, and wouldn't take no for an answer, wouldn't accept a DNF, I was able to get there. The energy is very different when you're finishing at the end of the day, when, you know, the big packs are done racing. I get it, people don't want to stand out in the heat, but, you know, being the last age group, that's part of it. But I did try to slap as many hands as I could, celebrate. It was my moment. So if there is any silver lining to that, I got the finish shoot to myself. I usually have a celebration at the finish line. I feel like I used every single celebration I've ever done at once. You know, I did a point to the sky, I did a flex, I did a point to the Team Saunders on the front of my jersey, and just everything came together for me to get to the finish line.
And I was right there with her, and that was the best moment of the day.
And that's a successful day. When Caitlin finishes, and she did great, by the way, and I finish, and we can be together, reunited at the finish line, and both of us having finisher medals.
We have worked for years for that moment, and to be able to share it together was unlike anything I could describe. New Zealand is an incredible country, and I'm so grateful that we have had this opportunity.
That is the story. That is a journey and a chapter closed, but what a ride to get there.
I'm bringing back the fire, fire, fire. It's burning with desire, desire, desire. And I will take you higher, higher, higher. Becoming victorious. Bringing back the fire, fire, fire. It's burning with desire, desire, desire. And I will take you higher, higher, higher. Becoming victorious.
I did have a funny moment at the finish line. So I had just finished and I'd gone down the ramp and I had my hands on my hip. I was tired, I was spent, and I turned around and I was looking up to see if my name was still on the board. And I just knew eventually like a volunteer would come and give me my medal and my towel, and they're going to all the other finishers that were around me, and I'm just standing there with my hands up like, you know, come on. Eventually a volunteer comes, and it was a great moment. And so thank you to all the volunteers. Y'all were all amazing at every part of the race. Every one of y'all were incredible. And without y'all, I know that races like this will not happen. Thank you all for welcoming us into your city and allowing us to do what we love.